If you've been dating a woman and she says certain things to you, I don't care how much you like her, you should take your shoes, your pride, and your sanity and leave. I'm not talking about small arguments or harmless jokes. I'm talking about phrases that reveal something much deeper. The kind of words that expose her mindset, her intentions, and the level of respect she has for you as a man. Before we go any further, I want you to think about your own relationship experiences. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling confused, guilty, or somehow smaller than you did before it started? Have you ever replayed a woman's words in your head late at night, trying to figure out whether you were overreacting or whether something genuinely felt wrong? If so, you're not alone. Thousands of men experience this every day, and most never realize what's actually happening beneath the surface. I'm Lauren Garcia, the host of Lauren's Psychology Diary, and today we're diving into a topic that is often misunderstood, emotionally charged, and incredibly important for anyone who wants healthier relationships. Here's something fascinating about human psychology. Most people don't reveal who they are through grand gestures. They reveal themselves through patterns, through repeated behaviors, through seemingly small comments that slowly expose their beliefs, attitudes, and emotional habits. The words people choose matter, because language isn't just communication. Language is a window into perception. Now, before anyone misunderstands this conversation, let's establish something important. This isn't about attacking women. This isn't about assuming every woman who says one unfortunate thing is toxic. Healthy people occasionally say things they don't mean. We all make mistakes. We all speak from frustration sometimes. What we're discussing today are recurring phrases and recurring patterns. When certain statements appear repeatedly, they often reveal deeper emotional dynamics that can slowly damage trust, confidence, and mutual respect. One of the biggest mistakes men make is assuming attraction automatically means compatibility. It doesn't. A woman can be beautiful, intelligent, funny, and exciting, and still be completely wrong for you emotionally. That's a difficult lesson because attraction has a way of making people ignore warning signs. When emotions become involved, logic often takes a backseat. Imagine a man named David. David meets a woman who seems perfect. Their chemistry is incredible. Conversations flow effortlessly. Every date feels exciting. For the first few months, he feels lucky just to be around her. Then subtle things begin happening. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small comments, small criticisms, small dismissals. Every time he feels uncomfortable, he explains it away. She's just stressed. She's had a bad day. She didn't mean it. She's joking. Months later, he realizes he's become someone he barely recognizes. He's constantly second-guessing himself. He's anxious before conversations. He's afraid of saying the wrong thing. And here's the scary part. The relationship didn't become unhealthy overnight. It happened one conversation at a time, one phrase at a time, one ignored red flag at a time. That's why today's discussion matters. Because emotional erosion is rarely dramatic. It's subtle. It's gradual. And often, the first clues are hidden in everyday language. The first phrase we need to talk about is one that sounds surprisingly harmless. You're too sensitive. At first glance, this statement seems innocent, maybe even reasonable. After all, there are situations where someone genuinely overreacts. But here's what psychology tells us. Context matters. When someone repeatedly responds to your concerns by labeling you as too sensitive, they're often shifting attention away from their behavior and placing the focus entirely on your reaction. Notice how powerful that move is. Instead of discussing the issue itself, the conversation suddenly becomes about whether your feelings are valid. And that's a dangerous shift. Because healthy communication isn't about determining whether someone is allowed to feel hurt. Healthy communication begins by acknowledging that they do feel hurt. Imagine this scenario. You spend an entire week planning a special evening. You make reservations, you rearrange your schedule, you put genuine effort into creating a meaningful experience. At the last minute, she cancels with little explanation. Naturally, you feel disappointed. You calmly express that disappointment. Instead of acknowledging your feelings, she laughs and says, "Wow, you're so sensitive. What just happened?" The original issue disappeared. The conversation is no longer about her actions. Now it's about your emotional response. Psychologists often refer to this pattern as emotional invalidation. Over time, emotional invalidation creates a powerful psychological effect. People begin doubting their own perceptions. They start asking themselves questions like, maybe I am overreacting. Maybe my standards are too high. Maybe I shouldn't say anything. And that's exactly where problems begin. Because relationships thrive when both people feel safe expressing concerns. The moment someone feels punished for speaking honestly, communication starts dying. I remember reading about a study involving long-term couples where researchers found something fascinating. Successful couples weren't the ones who avoided conflict. They were the ones who handled conflict respectfully. Think about that. Respect isn't measured when everything is going well. Respect is measured when disagreements occur. Anyone can be loving during good times. The real test happens when someone tells you they've been hurt. How do you respond? Do you listen or do you dismiss? Do you seek understanding or do you seek victory? The answer reveals far more than people realize. And gentlemen, here's a difficult truth. Many men stay in situations where their feelings are repeatedly dismissed because they're afraid of being seen as weak. Ironically, speaking honestly about your feelings isn't weakness. Suppressing them out of fear is. Real emotional strength involves being able to communicate clearly without aggression, without hostility, and without shame. A woman who respects you won't necessarily agree with everything you say, but she will care enough to understand why you're saying it. That difference matters. Now let's move into the second phrase, because this one is incredibly common and incredibly destructive. You should be more like, the moment comparison enters a relationship, something important changes. Comparison sends a hidden message. The message isn't simply that another person has a desirable quality. The message becomes, who you are right now isn't enough. Human beings naturally compare themselves to others. It's part of how our brains work, but repeated comparisons inside intimate relationships can be devastating. Why? Because relationships are supposed to be places where people feel accepted while they grow, not places where they constantly feel evaluated. Imagine a man named Michael. Michael works hard. He's responsible. He's supportive. He genuinely cares about his partner. One evening she says, "You know, my friend's husband is so much more romantic." Michael laughs it off. A week later she says, "My ex was much more spontaneous." He ignores it. A month later she says, "You should be more ambitious like Jason from work." Suddenly, Michael feels like he's competing against ghosts, against strangers, against memories, against impossible standards. And here's what often happens next. He begins changing himself, not because he wants to grow, but because he's trying to earn approval. That's a completely different motivation. Growth driven by inspiration is healthy. Growth driven by fear of inadequacy is exhausting. Psychology consistently shows that people flourish when they feel valued, not when they feel constantly measured. The irony is that excessive comparison often destroys the very qualities that made someone attractive in the first place. Confidence disappears. Authenticity disappears. Spontaneity disappears. The relationship slowly transforms into a performance, and no one can perform forever. One of the most attractive qualities in any human being is emotional security, the ability to feel accepted while continuing to improve. Healthy partners encourage growth. Unhealthy dynamics create chronic feelings of insufficiency. There's an important distinction there. A supportive partner might say, "I believe in you." A critical partner says, "Why aren't you more like him?" Can you hear the difference? One inspires, the other diminishes. One builds confidence, the other undermines it. And over time, those differences shape the entire emotional climate of a relationship. Before we continue, I want you to reflect on something. Have you ever found yourself changing who you are just to avoid criticism? Have you ever felt like no matter what you did, it wasn't enough? If that resonates with you, leave a comment below and share your experience. You're not just helping yourself, you're helping other viewers realize they're not alone. Because in part 2, we're going to explore 3 even more revealing phrases. We'll talk about what it really means when someone repeatedly says, "I don't need you." We'll unpack one of the most powerful forms of emotional manipulation, hidden inside the phrase, "If you loved me, you would." And we'll expose why the seemingly playful statement, "You're lucky to have me," can quietly transform an equal partnership into a dangerous imbalance of power. Most importantly, we'll discuss how emotionally healthy, high-value individuals respond when these patterns appear, and why understanding these dynamics can completely change the future of your relationships. Because sometimes the words people use don't just tell you how they feel, they tell you exactly who they are. And once you learn how to listen carefully, you'll never hear relationships the same way again. The third phrase is deceptively simple. "I don't need you." Now, before we dive into this, let's clarify something important. Independence is healthy. In fact, one of the strongest foundations of a successful relationship is having 2 individuals who are capable of standing on their own while choosing to build a life together. A healthy woman doesn't need a man to survive. A healthy man doesn't need a woman to survive. But that's not the point. The point is how the phrase is used. There's a world of difference between saying, "I know how to take care of myself," and saying, "I don't need you." The first statement communicates confidence. The second often communicates emotional distance. And psychology teaches us something fascinating about human connection. Relationships aren't built on necessity. They're built on significance. Every human being wants to feel that their presence matters. Not because they're controlling, not because they're insecure, but because emotional bonding is one of our deepest psychological needs. Think about the people you love most, your family, your closest friends, the people who have stood beside you through difficult times. You don't want them to need you in an unhealthy way, but you do want to feel that your presence adds value to their lives. You want to know that if you disappeared tomorrow, your absence would be felt. That's part of being human. When someone repeatedly says, "I don't need you," they're often sending a subtle message that your contributions are irrelevant. Your effort doesn't matter, your sacrifices don't matter, your support doesn't matter. And over time, that message becomes emotionally exhausting. Let me tell you about a situation that many men will recognize. Imagine a man named Ryan. Every morning, he wakes up early to help his partner. He supports her goals. He listens when she's stressed. He celebrates her successes. He remembers important dates. He makes sacrifices when necessary. Yet every disagreement seems to end the same way. She crosses her arms and says, "I don't need you." At first, Ryan ignores it. Then he starts wondering why he's investing so much energy into someone who seems determined to remind him that he's replaceable. Months later, something changes. He becomes emotionally distant. Not because he stopped caring, because he stopped feeling valued. This is something many people misunderstand. Appreciation is not a luxury in relationships. It's fuel. Without appreciation, emotional investment slowly dies. People stop trying. People stop opening up. People stop showing up emotionally. Not because they're selfish, because human beings naturally withdraw from environments where they feel invisible. Now here's the interesting part. Truly confident people rarely need to remind others how independent they are. Their behavior already demonstrates it. When someone repeatedly announces their independence during conflicts, it's often less about strength and more about power. It's a way of creating emotional leverage, a way of saying, "I can walk away more easily than you can." And whenever one partner starts using emotional detachment as a weapon, trust begins to erode. The healthiest relationships create interdependence, not dependence, not detachment, interdependence. That's when two people remain fully capable on their own, while still valuing the unique role the other person plays in their life. That's the sweet spot. That's where intimacy thrives. Now let's move to the fourth phrase, because this one may be the most manipulative of them all. If you loved me, you would. The moment you hear these words, pay attention, because this phrase often disguises emotional pressure as emotional vulnerability. On the surface, it sounds romantic, it sounds emotional, it sounds sincere. But beneath the surface, it often carries a hidden threat. The threat is simple: prove your love or risk being judged. Think about how powerful that psychological trap is. The person isn't discussing whether the request itself is reasonable. Instead, they're connecting compliance to love. Now, the conversation isn't about the action. It's about your character. It's about your devotion. It's about whether you're a good partner. And that's where manipulation begins. Let's look at a real-world example. A man is struggling financially. He's trying to pay off debt. He's working hard to build stability. One day, his girlfriend wants an expensive vacation. He explains that the timing isn't right. Instead of discussing the issue maturely, she responds with, "If you loved me, you would make it happen." Notice what just happened. The financial discussion disappeared. The practical reality disappeared. Now he's forced to defend his love. That's emotional blackmail. And emotional blackmail works because it attacks something most people deeply value: their identity. Nobody wants to be perceived as selfish. Nobody wants to feel like they're failing someone they love. Manipulative people understand this, consciously or unconsciously. They know that guilt is often more powerful than logic, so they create a false choice. Either do what I want or prove you don't care. But healthy relationships don't operate that way. Healthy love allows room for disagreement. Healthy love respects boundaries. Healthy love understands that saying no to a request isn't the same as saying no to the relationship. One of the most important lessons you can learn is this: love and compliance are not the same thing. Let me repeat that. Love and compliance are not the same thing. Someone can deeply love you and still disagree with you. Someone can adore you and still set boundaries. Someone can care about you while refusing a request. Mature love understands that. Manipulative love fears it. One exercise I often recommend is incredibly simple. The next time someone says, "If you loved me, you would," mentally replace it with, "If you loved me, you would ignore your own needs for mine." Suddenly, the statement becomes much easier to evaluate, because genuine love isn't about surrendering your identity. It's about creating a partnership where both people's needs matter. And that brings us to the fifth and final phrase. A phrase that often sounds playful, but can completely transform the power dynamic of a relationship. "You're lucky to have me." Now, some couples joke with each other. Healthy teasing exists. Context matters. But when this phrase becomes a recurring attitude rather than an occasional joke, something deeper is happening. At its core, this statement creates hierarchy. It establishes one person as the prize and the other as the pursuer. One person as superior, the other as fortunate. The problem is that healthy relationships require equality. Not identical roles, not identical personalities, but equal value. When one partner consistently positions themselves above the other, resentment eventually follows. Imagine a woman who constantly reminds her boyfriend how many men wanted her, how attractive she is, how lucky he is she chose him. At first he laughs. Then he starts working harder to impress her. Then harder. Then harder. Eventually, he begins living for approval rather than connection. This is one of the biggest psychological traps people fall into. They stop being themselves. They start performing. And performance is exhausting. The sad reality is that many people spend years trying to earn validation from someone who has no intention of giving it freely. The goalpost keeps moving. Nothing is ever enough. No accomplishment is impressive enough. No sacrifice is meaningful enough. No effort is appreciated enough. Because the imbalance itself has become the foundation of the relationship. Healthy partners don't make each other feel inferior. They make each other feel valued. A woman who truly respects a man doesn't need to remind him she's special. Her character shows it. Her actions show it. Her consistency shows it. Likewise, a man who truly respects a woman doesn't need to constantly remind her she's fortunate to be with him. His behavior communicates his value naturally. The strongest people don't announce their worth. They embody it. And that's a lesson that extends far beyond dating. Now let's bring everything together. If you've listened carefully, you may have noticed a pattern connecting all 5 phrases. You're too sensitive. You should be more like him. I don't need you. If you loved me, you would. You're lucky to have me. At first glance, these phrases seem unrelated, but psychologically, they all accomplish the same thing. They reduce your value while increasing the speaker's power. They make you question yourself. They make you seek approval. They make you work harder for acceptance. And the moment a relationship becomes centered around one person's validation, balance disappears. Here's what emotionally healthy, high-value individuals do differently. They pay attention to patterns. Not promises, not excuses, patterns. Because people reveal themselves repeatedly. A single comment may be a mistake. A repeated comment becomes information. A repeated behavior becomes a forecast. One of the greatest relationship skills you can develop is the ability to trust what people consistently show you. Not what they occasionally tell you. Not what you hope they mean. What they repeatedly demonstrate. When respect is present, disagreements feel productive. When respect is absent, disagreements feel degrading. When respect is present, communication creates clarity. When respect is absent, communication creates confusion. When respect is present, both people grow. When respect is absent, one person slowly shrinks. That's why respect is so important. In many ways, respect is the foundation that supports everything else. Trust grows from respect. Communication grows from respect. Intimacy grows from respect. Even love struggles to survive without it. And here's a truth that some people won't like hearing. The strongest relationship decision isn't always staying. Sometimes it's leaving. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from a dynamic that repeatedly damages their confidence, their peace, and their self-respect. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of self-preservation. Because your emotional health matters. Your self-worth matters. The way you allow others to treat you matters. And every time you tolerate chronic disrespect, you send a message about what you're willing to accept. So let me leave you with a question. If someone spoke to your best friend the way your partner speaks to you, what advice would you give them? Would you tell them to ignore it? Would you tell them they're overreacting? Or would you tell them they deserve better? Sometimes the advice we freely give others is the exact advice we need to hear ourselves. If this conversation resonated with you, take a moment and share your experience in the comments below. Your story could help someone else recognize a pattern they've been ignoring for years. And if you enjoy deep conversations about female psychology, relationship dynamics, emotional intelligence, attraction, communication, and human behavior, make sure you subscribe to Lauren's Psychology Diary and turn on notifications. In the next video, we're going to explore the hidden psychological tests many women use without even realizing they're doing it, why they happen, what they reveal, and how emotionally intelligent men respond without losing themselves in the process. Until then, remember this. Never sacrifice your self-respect to keep someone else's attention. The right relationship won't require you to shrink yourself in order to be loved. It will challenge you to grow while reminding you that you were worthy all along.